Sophia Brown vanished in downtown Indianapolis on the night of September 12, 1998. After leaving the small diner on Washington Street, following a late shift. The city was still buzzing with neon lights and the sound of traffic, but in the peripheral streets, thick darkness swallowed all noise. At 11:30 p.m., coworkers saw Sophia slip on her faded denim jacket, wave goodbye, and walk alone toward the parking lot. In the trunk of her silver Civic, her familiar handbag remained, along with the mud-stained shoes she wore to work each day. A witness briefly spotted a woman resembling Sophia standing near a black blazer, and then everything fell silent. What happened in the next 2 hours would haunt Indianapolis for 2 decades. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Sophia Brown, 27, was a familiar face as a waitress at the small diner on Washington Street, a spot frequented by taxi drivers, late-shift office workers, and regular patrons around downtown Indianapolis for late-night meals. Her hands were calloused from washing dishes and serving, her eyes always carrying a mix of exhaustion and resilience. Sophia was a single mother to 6-year-old Emily, a little girl who clung to her grandmother during long nights, waiting for her mom to return with leftover food or a small pastry from the diner. Their life was simple but grueling, meager tips collected each night, rent always due at the last minute, and the dream of giving Emily a proper education being the sole motivation keeping Sophia going. Indianapolis in 1998 wore 2 contrasting faces by day, gleaming high-rises, a bustling pace in basketball arenas filled with cheers for the Pacers, the community's pride. But at night, the outer streets turned menacing, with high rates of violence, carjackings, break-ins, and brawls becoming so common that locals grew accustomed to them. In this environment, Sophia accepted danger as part of life, as long as she had a job to support her daughter. On the night of September 12th, her shift ended at 11:30 p.m. The diner was nearly empty, with only the hum of the dishwasher and the thick smell of grease lingering in the air. Sophia untied her apron, tucked her hair back, and slipped on her faded blue denim jacket she often wore on chilly nights. A few coworkers, still cleaning tables, waved goodbye and told her to get home safely. Sophia responded with a tired, kind smile, a familiar ritual before leaving. With her small cloth bag slung over her shoulder, she stepped out of the diner, heading toward the parking lot a few blocks away. The September night air was slightly chilly, the streets sparse with people, with only a few neon lights flickering from late-night shops. Sophia's shadow stretched long on the sidewalk, cast under dim yellow streetlights, like a fragile streak swallowed by the darkness. The last coworker to watch her silhouette turned back to clear tables, unaware it was the final time anyone would see Sophia. On the quiet street, wind whistled through old buildings, and flickering lights made everything feel more ominous. And then, the young woman's figure vanished into the Indianapolis night, leaving a chilling void, as if the city had swallowed her without a trace. The next morning, that void became a real terror when Sophia Brown had not returned to the small apartment where her 6-year-old daughter, Emily, sat waiting, dazed. Linda Brown, Sophia's mother, sensed something was wrong early on. Sophia's routine never wavered. No matter how late her shift, she always came home, set her handbag on the kitchen table, hung her faded denim jacket, and checked on her daughter. But on the morning of September 13th, 1998, the apartment was silent. Linda called the diner on Washington Street, hoping for some delay. The shift manager confirmed Sophia had left at 11:30 p.m., healthy and smiling at coworkers. That call left Linda reeling, and she immediately contacted the Indianapolis police. Within an hour, 2 MPD officers stood in the apartment, taking a missing person report. Linda, trembling, repeated, she'd never leave her daughter behind. Never. Those words were enough to convince them this wasn't a case of a night out or a family dispute. The missing person, Sophia Brown file was officially opened that morning. Investigators began tracing every small detail. They visited the diner, spoke with night shift staff and regular customers. A coworker recalled seeing Sophia head toward the parking lot south of Washington Street, but nothing more. A regular customer mentioned briefly spotting a woman in a denim jacket, walking quickly toward the end of the street, though he wasn't certain it was Sophia. These fragmented pieces only heightened the unease. Group T split into patrol groups. One scoured the alleys connecting Washington to Maryland Street, areas known for robberies and fights. Another checked public parking lots around downtown, questioning security guards and nearby residents. With each passing hour, hope of finding Sophia safe grew thinner. Linda sat hunched on a chair, clutching Emily, listening to the crackle of police radios with a tightening heart. By late morning, an officer reported finding a silver Honda Civic in a parking lot a few blocks from the diner. The driver's door was slightly ajar, as if forgotten. When cross-checked, police confirmed it was Sophia's car. The scene was immediately cordoned off. In the harsh sunlight, the silver Civic became the focus of every gaze. Officers, gloved, opened the door and inspected every detail. On the front seat were a few scraps of paper and a cheap cassette case, with no signs of a struggle. But in the trunk, they found Sophia's familiar handbag, still containing her wallet, Idaho, and even a few tips from her last shift. A pair of mud-stained work shoes lay haphazardly in the corner of the trunk. For those who knew Sophia, this was jarring. She never left her work shoes in the car. Locals around the lot began gathering, murmuring. An elderly woman from a nearby apartment said she heard an engine start and stop abruptly around midnight, but assumed it was someone testing their car. A young man claimed he briefly saw a figure standing near the Civic, but wasn't sure if it was Sophia. These fleeting memories were recorded by police, piecing together a partial picture, but the gaps remained larger than any fragment. Upon closer inspection, investigators found no blood or clear signs of violence in the car, yet the presence of the handbag and shoes suggested Sophia hadn't left willingly. If she intended to disappear, she would have taken her ID, money, and essentials. The fact that the Civic was abandoned just blocks from her workplace indicated her journey home was interrupted almost immediately. Police began treating this as a suspicious disappearance, possibly linked to a violent crime. By afternoon, IMPD held a brief press conference. Images of the cordoned-off silver Civic and Sophia's youthful face appeared on the evening news, shaking Indianapolis. A young woman, a single mother, vanished in the heart of the city without a trace. Linda Brown spoke one line to the cameras. "My daughter would never leave Emily. Someone took her." That plea doubled as a warning. If Sophia could disappear so easily, anyone could be next. From that moment, the search for Sophia Brown began, a journey that would haunt the community for years. The silver Honda Civic, sealed off in the parking lot, became the community's focal point, but for police, it was just the start of a complex maze. After securing the scene and collecting initial evidence, IMPD shifted focus to those who last saw Sophia Brown alive. Every account, every tiny detail, could be the link to bridge the chilling gap from the night of September 12, 1998. Investigators returned to the diner on Washington Street, where Sophia worked that evening shift. Each employee was interviewed separately to ensure untainted statements. A female coworker recalled that around 11:25, Sophia removed her apron, folded it, and stored it in a locker, slipped on her faded denim jacket, and said, "See you tomorrow." She left at exactly 11:30, alone. No one saw her speak with any customer after her shift, nor were there signs she planned to meet anyone. The night manager confirmed Sophia was a disciplined worker, never missing shifts or vanishing without reason. This reinforced the theory. Sophia left the diner in a normal state, but something happened within minutes. While canvassing the area, a taxi driver was located and brought to the station for questioning. He remembered the night clearly, as his shift ran late, frequently driving downtown routes. Around midnight, as his cab idled at a red light a few blocks from the diner, he glimpsed a woman standing near an old black Chevy Blazer. She wore a denim jacket, had a petite frame, and brown hair tied back, details matching Sophia's description. What caught his attention was the Blazer's lights being off, parked quietly at the lot's edge. He saw no struggle or anyone else, just two faint figures in the dim streetlight. When the light turned green, he drove on, thinking little of it until hearing about the abandoned Civic the next morning. Another witness, a homeless man who frequented the parking lot, reported hearing a brief argument after 11:30, like two people in a hushed dispute. He couldn't make out words, only recalling a woman's voice mixed with a low male tone, followed by silence. Too wary to approach, it was just a passing impression. Still, for police it aligned suspiciously with the taxi driver's account. In 1998, downtown Indianapolis lacked the surveillance systems of later years. No CCTV covered the parking lot, and no street cameras captured Sophia leaving the diner or the black Blazer moving. All that remained were fragile witness memories, prone to distortion by time, light, and fatigue. Yet, police had to rely on them as their only leads. By the afternoon of September 13th, IMPD built a detailed timeline from the sparse accounts and data. At 11:30 p.m., Sophia left the diner in her denim jacket, carrying her bag. Between 11:35 and 11:40, a taxi driver saw a woman resembling Sophia near a black Blazer in a lot a few blocks away. Around the same time, the homeless man heard a brief argument. Before midnight, Sophia's Civic was abandoned with its door ajar. After that, a void. No one knew where Sophia went, with whom, or what happened. Investigators scrutinized every detail. If the black Blazer was involved, who owned it? Did Sophia know the driver? Was she lured or forced to approach? If there was an argument, why no cries for help, and why did it end so abruptly, as if cut off in an instant? These questions echoed in IMPD's meeting room, as the timeline remained riddled with unfillable gaps. Linda Brown visited the station that first evening for an update. Hearing about the black Blazer and the argument, she broke down. To her, Sophia wasn't one to seek trouble, but nor would she stay silent if threatened. The thought that her daughter might have been coerced or endangered on her way home left her speechless, choking on tears. 6-year-old Emily, still not grasping the situation, clung to her grandmother's hand, asking, "Where's Mommy?" No one could answer. The second night passed, with police continuing to sweep the area, knocking on doors, questioning witnesses. They knew each hour reduced the odds of finding Sophia alive. Yet, despite exhaustion, they clung to every lead. In the heart of the bustling city, a mystery grew. A young woman, gone from downtown, leaving her silver Civic as a cold testament. In those early hours, investigators realized this wasn't a simple missing person case. It was a journey that would stretch years, filled with doubt, fear, and unfillable voids. In the initial hours after piecing together Sophia's final steps, MPD detectives knew they needed to identify those with the strongest motives. When Eric Dawson's name surfaced in Sophia's personal file, no one in the investigative team was surprised. Eric, 30, was Sophia's ex-boyfriend, a name already marked in local police records. 2 years prior, he'd been arrested for domestic violence against a former partner, a charge later reduced to disorderly conduct after the victim withdrew her complaint. To seasoned investigators, a man with a history of violence was never a name to dismiss lightly. On September 14th, Eric was summoned to IMPD headquarters. In the small interrogation room, under the harsh light casting shadows on the metal table, he appeared far calmer than the detectives expected. Eric claimed that on the night of September 12th, he was at a friend's house in Beech Grove, over 10 miles from the scene, drinking beer and watching basketball. "I didn't leave," he stated firmly. Police contacted the friend, who confirmed Eric's presence all night. But the alibi wasn't entirely convincing, resting solely on a potentially biased individual. Meanwhile, another witness added a detail that drew police attention back to Eric. A resident near Eric's home reported seeing a black Chevy Blazer parked near an alley by his house days before Sophia's disappearance. Though unsure if it was the same Blazer from the lot on September 12th, the coincidence prompted investigators to hypothesize, was Eric connected to the mysterious vehicle, or did he at least know its owner. Detectives began reviewing blazer registrations in the area, a challenging task in 1998, without a comprehensive digital database requiring manual DMV searches. With no surveillance footage or license plate recorded, the lead was fragile and easily stalled. Eric stuck to his story. He admitted to dating Sophia but said they'd been apart for some time and no longer spoke. When asked why they split, he shrugged. She wanted to settle down. I wasn't ready. Police noted he seemed slightly defensive when Sophia's name came up, but showed no overt reaction strong enough to justify charges. When asked about Eric, Linda Brown tensed immediately. She recalled Sophia's complaints about his hot temper, how he'd raised his voice even with Emily present. Though Sophia had ended things, Linda feared Eric still lingered in her daughter's life. Police recorded her statement, but they knew a mother's emotions couldn't substitute for legal evidence. In the internal report at the end of the day, the lead investigator concluded Eric Dawson must remain a primary suspect. Despite his alibi being confirmed by a friend, there was still a possibility of collusion. The appearance of the black blazer near Eric's home was a factor that could not be ignored. However, the absence of direct evidence, no DNA traces, no witnesses seeing Eric with Sophia, forced police to release him after questioning. Not everyone agreed with this decision. Some officers believed that if Eric was indeed involved, letting him walk free only heightened the danger, but legal procedures demanded concrete evidence, and IMPD knew they had to follow the law. When Eric left the police station late on September 14th, local media captured images of his stone-cold face, eyes bloodshot. Those photos appeared on the front page of the Indianapolis Star the next morning, with the headline, "Ex-boyfriend, suspect number 1." Public reaction erupted. For many, the story of a young woman vanishing in the heart of the city was already horrifying, and now the detail of a violent ex-boyfriend added fuel, as if scripted from a familiar crime drama. But police knew it was more complex. The first suspect is rarely the true culprit, and without solid evidence, all theories were mere shadows. As the case file grew thicker with conflicting statements and unfillable gaps, one thing became clear: the investigation would not be simple, and the black blazer and Eric Dawson's name were just the starting points of a labyrinth with no exit. They knew they couldn't focus too long on one suspect without evidence, and the file began revealing other names in Sophia's daily orbit. Among them, Mark Ellison emerged almost immediately. Mark, 32, was a co-worker on Sophia's evening shift at the Washington Street diner. To regular customers, he was just an ordinary employee with a gruff voice, often cracking over-the-top jokes. But to female co-workers, the story was different. Several complaints had been noted about Mark's habit of teasing, making crude remarks, and even being warned by the manager for inappropriate touching while working with another female employee. Sophia never formally complained, but close friends said she felt uncomfortable working shifts with him. For police, this was reason enough to broaden the investigation. On September 15th, Mark was called in for questioning. Unlike Eric Dawson, linked through a past romantic relationship, Mark appeared nervous, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool room. When asked about the night of September 12th, he claimed he left the diner at 11:15 p.m., about 15 minutes before Sophia. I went straight home. I live alone. No one can vouch for me, but that's the truth, Mark said, his voice rushed. Detectives noted his statement, but immediately saw a problem. Mark's alibi was weak, with no witness to confirm it. Police cross-checked his account with the manager and other employees. The manager confirmed Mark left before Sophia, but couldn't recall the exact time. A coworker said she saw him grab his jacket around 11:20, but wasn't sure if he left immediately. Those few minutes of discrepancy could be harmless, but could also be critical in the context of Sophia vanishing minutes after leaving the diner. The investigative team decided to dig deeper. Sophia's car was searched thoroughly, but no traces linked to Mark were found, no unfamiliar fingerprints, no fabric or hair matching him. Sophia's locker at the diner was also inspected, revealing no notes, letters, or evidence suggesting tension between them. This left police puzzled. If Mark was involved, why was there no physical evidence? In follow-up interviews, Mark grew belligerent. He snapped when repeatedly asked about his departure time, even slamming the table. "I told you I went home. What more do you want?" Detectives noted this behavior as suspicious, as innocent people typically cooperate, while those hiding something often lash out. Still, anger wasn't a substitute for evidence. Internally, officers debated whether to keep Mark as a secondary suspect. A veteran detective argued that men with a history of harassment often escalate their behavior, and Sophia's resistance could have spiraled out of control. But a younger investigator countered, if he did it, there'd be something in the car, on the victim, or at least a witness seeing them together. We've got nothing. The debate only deepened the case's doubts without providing the key piece. Meanwhile, the media frenzy continued. The Indianapolis Star published a piece on the inner workings of the Washington Street diner, hinting at rumors about Mark Ellison's history of harassment. The community erupted, with several women who had worked with Mark at other restaurants calling police to share their own experiences of his inappropriate behavior. All were recorded, but none carried enough weight for court. For Linda Brown, each new name was a fresh stab. When Mark was mentioned, she shook her head. "I don't believe Sophia would get involved with a man like that. She was too careful, she'd steer clear." But that certainty made police more cautious. If Sophia had rebuffed or ignored Mark, could it have sparked his anger? On the night of September 15th, when Mark was released from the station, cameras caught his scowling face. This time, public opinion split. Some believed Mark was the most likely culprit, while others thought police were desperate and scapegoating a coworker. Despite no physical evidence, Mark Ellison remained on the official suspect list. The team noted, weak alibi, aggressive demeanor, multiple coworker complaints. No evidence, but cannot be ruled out. On the timeline board, Mark's name was written alongside Eric Dawson's, two red lines connecting them to the 11:15-11:30 window, when Sophia vanished. From there, the investigation grew broader, as each suspect carried their own mysteries, deepening the shadow over that fateful Indianapolis night. Mark Ellison's addition to the suspect list heightened the investigation's tension, but alongside the interrogations, Indianapolis police knew they needed to expand the physical search if they hoped to find Sophia Brown alive. A city map was spread across the command table, with detectives circling routes Sophia might have taken after leaving the diner, their eyes lingering on the dark current weaving through the city, the White River. This river cut through neighborhoods, serving as both a spot for gatherings and a place criminals often used to dispose of evidence. On September 16th, 4 days after Sophia's disappearance, the search team deployed along the White River's banks. Vans carrying trained dogs rolled up to the vacant lot near the West Washington Street Bridge. When the doors opened, the specially trained dogs bounded out, sniffing every patch of grass and dirt. A group of volunteer divers, in coordination with the city's rescue team, donned black wetsuits and heavy oxygen tanks, ready to plunge into the cold, murky water. The Indianapolis sky was overcast, mirroring the collective mood. That first morning, a shout from the riverbank stopped hearts. A nylon bag caught in drifting branches revealed a piece of patterned fabric. Officers immediately sealed it for analysis. Linda Brown collapsed upon hearing the news, convinced it might be her daughter's clothing. But when the results came back, it was just an old garment from a homeless woman, unrelated to Sophia. A flicker of hope was snuffed out, leaving heavy disappointment. Over the next days, the search expanded miles along the river. Over 200 volunteers from across Indianapolis joined, carrying sticks, flashlights, and even small boats. They fanned out in groups, combing through tree hollows, thickets, and drainage pipes. Many were neighbors. Others heard the news on the radio and left work to help. The image of a long line of people in colorful jackets trudging along the White River under weak autumn sunlight became a heartbreaking portrait of a community searching for a woman lost without a trace. Divers persisted, plunging into the icy river. The autumn water was freezing, visibility near zero, each stroke brushing against rotten branches, rusted cans, or discarded tires. Once, they found a short black dress caught on rocks beneath the surface. News spread quickly, but analysis disproved it. Not Sophia's dress. These repeated false leads struck like blows to fragile hope. 2 weeks passed, and the White River was scoured from the Michigan Bridge to the city's south. But no trace of Sophia emerged. Police logged dozens of volunteer reports, strange screams at midnight, suspicious figures near the river, but all proved to be phantoms of a panicked community's imagination. The Brown family grew exhausted. Linda withered, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, waiting for the phone to ring with news of her daughter. 6-year-old Emily, still not fully grasping the situation, kept asking, "Where's Mommy?" That innocent question cut into her grandmother's heart like a blade. The media reported daily, from newspapers to local radio, but the attention yielded no concrete results. In a press conference, an MMPD spokesperson candidly admitted, "We've deployed all available resources. But at this moment, there's no solid evidence Sophia is still in the White River area." Those words brought tears to many. Hope of finding her alive was fading, replaced by fear that the darkness had claimed Sophia forever. As the sun set behind downtown skyscrapers, the long line of volunteers quietly dispersed, leaving the wet riverbank and muddy footprints. The search had drained the community's energy, met only with chilling silence. From here, the missing person, Sophia Brown file began shifting from urgent to a cold case in many minds, a case where darkness held the upper hand. As the White River search ended in disappointment, silence enveloped the city. Over 2 weeks of deploying dogs, divers, and hundreds of volunteers yielded only old clothes, rusted cans, and baseless rumors. Sophia Brown remained gone, as if she'd never existed on that path from the diner on September 12, 1998. But alongside this deadlock, other issues quietly sowed seeds for a greater tragedy: errors in the investigation's earliest hours. These seemed minor at the time, but later were seen as the primary reason Sophia's case dragged on for years, becoming one of Indianapolis's most haunting cold cases. The first error emerged at the silver Honda Civic, the most critical crime scene. During the interior inspection, an officer noticed a tiny red stain on the driver's seat. It resembled blood but was deemed too small to matter. In 1998, DNA analysis technology was rudimentary, and such minute samples were often labeled unusable. The initial report noted insufficient quantity for testing. The sample was collected, but quickly relegated to the bottom of the priority list. Only years later, with advanced science, did they realize that tiny blood stain could have been the key to unlocking the entire case. By then, time had blurred countless opportunities. The second error lay in the witness statements. On September 13th, when the taxi driver and homeless man recounted what they saw the night Sophia vanished, police recorded only brief notes. Instead of detailed accounts, reports were vague. Witness saw a woman resembling the victim near a dark SUV, or heard an argument, content unclear. No full statements, no signed confirmations, no precise location sketches. Later, when new detectives inherited the case, they admitted frustration. "We're almost guessing from scratch because what's left in the file is so thin." Another oversight further distorted the picture: no sketch or detailed description of the black Chevy Blazer, the only vehicle tied to witness accounts. At the time, a sketch artist could have been called to recreate the vehicle from witness memory. At minimum, a clear description of its model, year, or distinct features like decals or dents could have narrowed the search. Instead, it was reduced to dark SUV. In a city like Indianapolis, where hundreds of Blazers and SUVs roam daily, this was like tossing a needle into a desert. These errors initially drew little attention. The urgent pressure to search, limited resources, and public scrutiny pushed police toward broad sweeps rather than deep investigation. But over time, as the case stalled, it became clear that overlooked details created unbridgeable gaps. The blood stain on the seat, the vague witness reports, the absent blazer sketch, all combined to cost precious years that could have solved the case early. For the Brown family, learning of these errors later felt like betrayal. Linda tearfully said in a 2005 interview, "If they'd tested that bloodstain from the start, we might not have waited decades. They left too many gaps, and those gaps swallowed my Sophia." Her words sparked community outrage, with many questioning the local police's ability to handle serious missing person cases. Within IMPD, younger officers reviewing the file called it a bitter lesson. One later generation detective said, "We don't blame our predecessors, technology and awareness were different then. But the truth is, the lack of care in those early hours turned this into a cold case." Local media dubbed it the chain of initial errors. Each article, dissecting overlooked details, cut like a knife into the victim's family. More importantly, it sparked a broader debate in Indianapolis's legal community. How to avoid repeating such mistakes in future cases. For Sophia Brown, the reality was that for years, her case consisted only of faint leads and a thin file of hastily scribbled notes. Time passed, witnesses forgot what they saw. The black blazer blended into the city's sea of old cars, and the tiny, useless bloodstain sat quietly in the evidence room, awaiting a day when science could bring it to light. But that day was far off, and in those early years, the shadow of those errors cloaked Sophia's entire disappearance. The early mistakes sent the investigation into a labyrinth with no exit. The ignored bloodstain, vague witness statements, and absent blazer sketch caused Sophia Brown's case to stall quickly. By the fall of 1999, a year after her disappearance, MPD detectives faced a bitter truth. The case had no progress. In an internal meeting, the lead investigator declared that resources needed to shift to new cases, and Sophia's file would be temporarily closed, added to the cold case list. That decision struck the Brown family's last hopes like a dagger. Linda Brown, Sophia's mother, refused to stay silent. She knocked on every department's door, called the police station relentlessly, demanding any new leads. But the response was always the same. "We have no new information." To a mother, those words were a life sentence. Linda held on to the belief that the truth was out there, somewhere, and the police just hadn't searched hard enough. She kept every newspaper article, every snippet about the silver Civic, every mention of the mysterious black blazer, storing them in a wooden box as a way to keep the flame of hope alive. Meanwhile, Indianapolis entered the early 21st century with a rising tide of violent crime. Murders, armed robberies, and drug-related cases surged in the city's outskirts. The Criminal Investigation Unit was swamped with new files, each day bringing names that demanded higher priority. Sophia's case, a months-old disappearance with no leads, was gradually buried at the bottom of the stack. A young detective later recalled, "No one wanted to abandon the case, but when new bodies turned up daily, we had to make choices." From 1999 to 2003, the Brown family lived in a harsh cycle. Each year, on the anniversary of Sophia's disappearance, Linda held a small prayer vigil, inviting neighbors and friends to light candles. Emily, growing older and feeling her mother's absence more keenly, asked her grandmother tough questions. Why aren't the police still looking? Linda could only hug her, avoiding those innocent eyes. The media occasionally mentioned Sophia in cold case features, but her story was quickly overshadowed by fresher crimes. Many initial witnesses faded into oblivion. The homeless man who heard an argument vanished from downtown, untraceable. The taxi driver, who saw Sophia near the black blazer, moved to another state by 2001, leaving behind only hasty notes in the file. Each gap in human memory was like a door closing, narrowing the path to the truth. The Brown family didn't give up. Linda wrote to the Indiana governor, pleading to reopen the investigation. She contacted victim support organizations and even consulted lawyers to pressure the police. But the result was still silence. In a 2002 local TV interview, Linda cried out, "I can't believe a woman could vanish in the heart of a major city, and no one knows what happened. They tell me no new information, but I know something was missed. From 1999 to 2003, Sophia's file was opened only sporadically when a new detective joined the cold case unit. Each time, the family's hopes flared, only to be extinguished when no new leads emerged. The tiny blood stain on the driver's seat remained in its evidence bag, silently awaiting technology capable of analyzing it. The black blazer existed only in the fading memory of a witness now gone, and Sophia's name, to the police, became just a line on a cold case shelf. By 2003, Sophia Brown's disappearance had reached its 5th year without answers. To the community, it was one of hundreds of open cases. But for Linda and Emily, it was an unhealed wound, reopened with every cold reply. We have no new information. That period of stagnation created an unbridgeable void, one that, years later, only technology and renewed resolve could hope to fill. The year 2003 closed in heavy silence, with Sophia Brown's file marking 5 years untouched in the cold case storage. The Brown family continued their annual prayer vigils, while Emily, now 11, began to understand that "Where's Mommy?" had no easy answer. But in 2004, an unexpected event brought Mark Ellison's name back to the investigation table, not for Sophia, but for another victim. In June 2004, Mark Ellison was arrested by Indianapolis police after a young woman accused him of assault in a bar parking lot. The incident hit the media immediately, as Mark had been a suspect in Sophia's disappearance, though never charged. The news struck like a knife, reopening old wounds. The Brown family believed this was evidence Mark could have harmed Sophia 6 years earlier. With Ellison in custody, MPD reopened Sophia's file. A new interrogation was scheduled, this time aiming to uncover any inconsistencies in his old statements. In the familiar interrogation room, Ellison looked more haggard, his hair thinning, eyes darting. When Sophia's name came up, he smirked bitterly. "Back to that again? I told you. I don't know where she went." Detectives pressed hard on the timeline. In 1998, Ellison claimed he left the diner at 11:15 p.m., but this time, he stumbled. Around 11, or maybe 11:30, I don't remember exactly. The inconsistency was carefully noted, but lacked the weight to charge him. Ellison firmly denied meeting Sophia after her shift. Police decided to compare Ellison's DNA to evidence from the silver Civic, including the bloodstain overlooked in 1998. But the technology still couldn't extract a full profile from such a small sample. The result, insufficient for comparison, disappointment swept the investigation room. Once again, the key remained just out of reach. Investigators recontacted old witnesses. The taxi driver, who saw a woman near the black blazer, had moved out of state. His memory faded, saying only, "It might have been Sophia. I'm not sure." The homeless man who heard an argument was untraceable. No new witnesses emerged. The case was like shattered bones, impossible to reassemble. The Brown family was called in for an update. Linda clutched Emily's hand, now a young adult, when told of Ellison's arrest. For a moment, she thought justice might finally come, but when police said there was no matching DNA or new witnesses, she slumped in her chair. Tears streaming, she whispered, "They'll let it slip away again." And indeed, after weeks of investigation, Sophia's file was returned to its familiar shelf. Mark Ellison faced trial for the new assault, but it was entirely separate from the 1998 disappearance. To the public, Ellison remained a dangerous figure, but legally, he was untied to Sophia Brown. The media buzzed briefly, then quieted. Headlines like "Ellison arrested, former Sophia Brown suspect," gave way to newer stories of drugs and gang violence in Indianapolis. The community, already forgetting Sophia, mentioned her with faint regret. Maybe he did it, but they'll never prove it. For the Brown family, it was another psychological blow. Emily, now a teenager, watched her mother and grandmother grapple with daily pain. She grew quieter, no longer asking much about Sophia, but her eyes held an unfillable void. Linda kept writing to police and courts, but the familiar reply echoed, not enough evidence. The year 2004 closed in a bitter cycle. Mark Ellison's name resurfaced like a ghost, raising and crushing hopes. Sophia Brown's case remained stagnant, its file gathering dust on the cold case shelf. Once again, Indianapolis lived with the heavy silence surrounding one of its most heartbreaking mysteries. In the years that followed, from 2005 through the decade's end, Sophia's file was reviewed only periodically, more as a bureaucratic routine than a genuine investigative effort. On MPD's cold case shelf, the yellowed folder bearing Sophia Brown's name grew tattered, with new detectives occasionally assigned to familiarize themselves by reading it, though few believed it could be cracked. Police attempted to re-interview witnesses. Over 40 people from the original list were contacted, from the taxi driver who saw a woman near the black blazer, to Sophia's old coworkers at the Washington Street diner. But human memory, after years, was like a fogged mirror. The taxi driver, reached in 2006, shook his head. I can't recall her face clearly. Maybe it was her, maybe not. Witnesses once certain now said perhaps, or I'm not sure, rendering their statements worthless. Even coworkers who swore Sophia left the diner alone couldn't recall exact times, some even mistakenly suggesting she might have left with someone, contradicting the original file. These fragmented memories, instead of bringing clarity, only confused detectives further. Each supplemental report was filled with notes like unverifiable or unreliable, thickening the file without adding value. Meanwhile, the Brown family kept their hope alive in their own way. Each September 12th, Linda held a small memorial at Sophia's old apartment. Neighbors, friends, and sometimes a few local reporters came to light candles, place flowers, and hang photos of Sophia smiling in her denim jacket. Emily, now a teenager, stood by her grandmother, her eyes heavy with sorrow. In their prayers, Linda repeated, "We won't give up." But year after year, the candles burned and faded, and the truth remained absent. The media grew weary. If the image of the cordoned-off silver Civic shook Indianapolis in 1998, by the 2000s, Sophia's story was reduced to brief mentions in unsolved cold cases. Each memorial saw a young reporter sent to snap photos and record Linda's quotes, only for the story to air for a fleeting few seconds. The public, caught up in new crimes, shootings, and political scandals, gradually forgot Sophia. Within IMPD, the deadlock was stark. Veteran detectives admitted they'd hit a ceiling with the case. Some said bluntly, without new technology, this won't be solved. The tiny bloodstain in the Civic sat sealed in its plastic bag, a haunting reminder that the key was there from the start, but they were powerless. For Linda, each police promise of "we'll review it again" only deepened her disillusionment. She spoke of sleepless nights, imagining Sophia forced into the black blazer, gone forever. Emily, in her teenage years, grew angry at both the police and fate. In a school essay, she wrote, "My mom was taken, and everyone just says, we don't know." Her teacher teared up reading it but could do no more. By 2010, during a minor IMPD restructuring, a young detective reopened Sophia Brown's file, flipping through its yellowed pages. But all he found were contradictory statements, outdated witness addresses, and a list of suspects never charged. In a brief report, he wrote, "Case has no direction. Recommendation await DNA technology advancements." That conclusion was like a silent obituary for a decade of effort. The prolonged deadlock turned Sophia Brown's case into a collective obsession. A name cited in rookie training as a lesson in what happens when evidence is overlooked, when early opportunities are lost. But for Linda and Emily, it wasn't a training lesson, but a living loss, gnawing at their lives daily. A void stretching from 1998, growing with each memorial, never filled. The years of stagnation nearly buried Sophia Brown's case in Indianapolis's collective memory. Each passing autumn, the Browns lit candles, while police could only repeat, "We have nothing new." But in 2018, as IMPD restructured and formed the Cold Case Unit to leverage major DNA technology advances, a faint glimmer emerged. Among 50 prioritized cases, Sophia Brown's name ranked 17th, a seemingly ordinary number, but to Linda and Emily, it signaled the city hadn't entirely forgotten them. The new cold case unit combined veteran detectives with young forensic experts versed in modern DNA analysis. They were tasked with reviewing every page of the yellowed 1998 file, examining every sealed piece of evidence from 2 decades prior. In a storage room drawer, they found the small plastic bag holding the tiny blood stain from the Civic's driver's seat. In 1998, it was dismissed as insufficient for analysis. But in 2018, technology had changed. With techniques like touch DNA and next-generation sequencing, even a few cells could yield a genetic profile. Forensic experts viewed the evidence bag as the key to unlocking a door sealed for 20 years. An internal meeting followed. On a screen, young detectives outlined the plan. The blood stain would be sent to Indiana's most advanced lab, capable of analyzing minute samples. Results could take months, but if successful, this would be the first time Sophia's case had solid biological evidence. The room fell silent for a moment, then the cold case lead nodded. "This is the chance we've waited 2 decades for. Don't let it slip again." News of the reinvestigation leaked and hit local media. The Indianapolis Star ran, "Cold Case Unit Brings New Hope to Sophia Brown Disappearance." On TV, reporters stood outside police headquarters, discussing technological breakthroughs and the chance to solve a case thought forgotten. To the public, it was an unexpected spark. To the Brown family, it was a miracle they scarcely dared believe. Linda Brown, now in her 60s, choked up when asked for comment. "I've waited 20 years for this day. If there's justice, it has to come for Sophia, even if late." Emily, the little girl who waited in the dark apartment in 1998, now an adult, stood by her grandmother, nodding with teary eyes. In the following months, the cold case team pored over the file. They reread every vague witness statement, scoured old Blazer registrations despite changed ownerships, and most crucially, tracked the bloodstains DNA analysis. Each day, lab updates were scrutinized, even minor ones. Sample being extracted, initial sequence obtained. Each line was like a countdown to a truth. Generations of investigators and a family had awaited. But alongside hope came anxiety. Detectives knew if the blood sample was insufficient or didn't match any database, the case could slip back into silence. The pressure weighed heavily. In late-night cold case unit sessions, investigators sat for hours before Sophia's file. Eyes fixed on old photos, Sophia's youthful face, the cordoned-off silver Civic, her arm around Emily. In November 2018, after months of waiting, the lab announced the bloodstains DNA extraction was complete. The profile was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database. The cold case team sat before the screen, waiting for the query to run. They knew this moment could change everything. As processing flashed, no one dared breathe deeply. Then, initial results appeared. The DNA profile was complete enough for comparison. Though no immediate match was found, it was a monumental step after 20 years of silence. The detectives exchanged looks, their eyes sparking with resolve. They knew the game wasn't over, it had just restarted. From the ashes of early mistakes, Sophia Brown's case was reignited with hope after 2 decades. The wheels of justice, stalled for 20 years, began turning again. And this time, no one would let them stop halfway. As INPD's cold case unit tracked the bloodstains DNA analysis from the silver Civic, the team lived in days of tense anticipation. They knew DNA technology could open new doors, but it remained fragile. Then, in the summer of 2019, an unexpected event sent Sophia Brown's case in a direction no one foresaw. On July 7, 2019, a crew working on the I-465 highway expansion, cutting through a sparse forest in southwest Indianapolis, reported a strange find. While an excavator cleared earth, a worker spotted bone fragments mixed in the mud. Initially thought to be animal remains, their size and shape were eerily human. The site was immediately sealed, and police were called. When cold case investigators arrived, they saw a chilling scene, a small pit, partially unearthed, revealing a pelvis, rib fragments, and a cracked skull. Nearby, in decayed leaves, they found a thin silver necklace, tarnished, but bearing two engraved initials inside. SB. That moment silenced everyone. To the team, those initials were no mere coincidence. Linda Brown was notified that evening. Hearing about the necklace, she clutched Emily, now an adult, and both sobbed. Linda recalled Sophia always wore that silver necklace, engraved with her initials, a gift for her 18th birthday. That detail alone convinced the mother's heart that her daughter had been found, even if only as bones. The forest, near I-465, became a critical crime scene. Forensic teams set up white tents, strung yellow tape, and meticulously sifted through layers of earth to miss no trace. Construction halted, yielding the area to the investigation. Each bone fragment, each small object, was numbered, photographed, and sealed. The air was still, broken only by the click of cameras and the scratch of pens in the quiet forest. The news spread instantly. The next day, major outlets reported, remains found near I-465, possible link to 1998 disappearance. Indianapolis was stunned. After over 2 decades, Sophia Brown's name resurfaced. No longer a cold file but the center of a story breaking now. The skeletal remains were transported to the Marion County Coroner's Forensic Lab that night. There, experts finally faced the evidence they'd awaited for years. Plastic boxes containing the bones were neatly arranged on a cold steel table, illuminated by stark white lights that highlighted every crack and clinging speck of dirt. To the forensic anthropologists, these weren't just lifeless bones but a silent message from the past, Sophia Brown's final account of that fateful night in 1998. In the initial analysis, the team determined the remains belonged to an adult female, approximately 5'5" tall, matching Sophia's height in her file. The degree of decomposition and bone decay suggested the victim died around the late 1990s, aligning with Sophia's 1998 disappearance. The preliminary report noted, high likelihood of matching a missing person from the late 1990s, but what chilled the team was the skull. A long fracture ran diagonally from the temple to the back, indicating a heavy blow from a blunt object. The force was strong enough to cause traumatic brain injury, likely the direct cause of death. These marks ruled out an accident or a random fall. Someone had acted deliberately, beyond the skull. The ribs showed irregular fractures, identified as resulting from impact near the time of death. This supported the theory that Sophia endured a violent attack, possibly in a fierce struggle. The forensic experts emphasized, this condition is inconsistent with a car accident or high fall. These are signs of criminal activity. Meanwhile, intact teeth were selected for DNA extraction. By 2019, technology could retrieve profiles from dental pulp, yielding high-quality genetic data. Technicians in lab coats and gloves carefully opened each box, drilling into tooth roots to extract precious marrow. The samples were sent to the state lab for comparison with DNA from Sophia's 1998 file, collected from her hair and toothbrush. Weeks later, the results returned. The report, printed on white paper and stapled at the corner, was handed directly to the cold case team leader. Bold text stood out, DNA match. Probability 99.999%. The victim in the forest near I-465 was indeed Sophia Brown. In that moment, the meeting room froze. After 21 years, the mystery had a solid piece. Sophia was dead, and her remains had been found. The news was immediately relayed to the Brown family. Linda received the DNA results envelope from the lead investigator, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She sobbed, torn between agony and relief. At least I've found my daughter. I can bring her home. Emily, now in her 20s, stood silently, clutching her grandmother. For her, the confirmation ended years of wondering if her mother was still out there somewhere. But for the police, the DNA result wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. Sophia's disappearance was officially upgraded to a homicide. The skull fractures, the broken ribs, all pointed to her not just vanishing, she was killed. This raised urgent questions: who was the killer, and why had her body lain undetected by a busy highway for 2 decades? In a solemn press conference, an MPD representative confirmed the remains found near I-465 are Sophia Brown's. This is no longer a missing person case. This is a homicide, and we will continue investigating to bring the perpetrator to justice. The statement stunned Indianapolis. Residents, who had largely forgotten the case, were pulled back to 1998, the night a young woman stepped into the darkness and never returned. The media exploded. Newspapers published photos of the silver necklace beside bold headlines: DNA confirms, Sophia Brown mystery solved. On TV, anchors stressed, after over 20 years, Sophia has been found. But the biggest question remains: who killed her? For the Brown family, the revealed truth sharpened their pain. Linda quietly planned a proper burial for Sophia to rest in peace. Emily spent sleepless nights rereading old case articles, noting details she hadn't understood before. To her, justice for her mother wasn't just finding the killer, but forcing the city to face the mistakes that let a murder stay silent for 2 decades. As Sophia's bones were laid out on the cold metal table, her story took shape. A young woman, struck hard on the head, collapsed, and left by a forest's edge. But the killer's identity remained hidden in the shadows. For the cold case unit, the hardest part was yet to come. The hunt for the true murderer had only begun. The DNA confirmation from the remains' teeth was just the first step. But as examiners compared it to the 1998 file, another critical piece emerged. The tiny blood stain found on the Civic's driver's seat, once deemed too small to analyze, now matched the remains' DNA perfectly with modern technology. This eliminated all doubt Sophia had bled in her own car that fateful night. The initial oversights were now glaring, but they also opened a chance to reconstruct the events of September 12, 1998. Cold case investigators spread out old and new maps, piecing together clues. They rebuilt the timeline. Sophia left the Washington Street diner at 11:30 p.m. Walking to her Civic in a lot a few blocks away. There, someone ambushed or approached her. The bloodstain indicated she was injured in the car, possibly from a blow or fierce struggle. No evidence of gunfire was found in the Civic, so the theory leaned toward the killer using a blunt object, striking her head, causing disorientation and bleeding. Then, instead of abandoning the scene, the killer drove the Civic. The destination was the forest near I-465, where Sophia's remains were found 21 years later. Police calculated the distance about 25 minutes' drive from the diner to the disposal site. It was far enough to escape downtown's bustle, but close enough for the killer to return to the city that night, unnoticed. The Civic was then abandoned in a lot a few blocks from the diner, a deliberate act to mislead. The killer had taken Sophia in her own car, then returned it near the original scene to suggest she never left downtown. This aligned with 1998 witness accounts. A homeless man heard a brief argument in the lot, then silence, and a taxi driver vaguely recalled a woman resembling Sophia near a black Chevy Blazer. Clearly, Sophia was coerced or controlled at her car before being taken. The skull fracture at the temple further confirmed the fatal blow likely happened in the Civic. The team created a 3D model of the car, hypothesizing the killer sat in the passenger seat, attacking suddenly as Sophia started or prepared to drive. The blood stain on the driver's seat matched a scenario where Sophia slumped sideways, blood dripping onto the fabric. In the next press conference, IMPD declared, Sophia Brown's disappearance is now classified as a homicide. We're no longer searching for a missing person, we're hunting her killer. The news spread across Indianapolis from local papers to TV broadcasts. Residents were shaken, as Sophia's story had long been a mystery without answers. Now, with DNA and a reconstructed scenario, the dark truth emerged. Sophia wasn't a runaway or accident victim. She was targeted by a murderer. For the Brown family, this was a second shock in months. Linda, who had clung to hope for 2 decades, now faced the reality that her daughter died long ago, brutally killed. Emily, Sophia's daughter, sobbed in a media interview. "I thought maybe Mom was stuck somewhere or lost her memory. Now I know someone took her from me." Her words fueled public outrage, demanding police swiftly bring the killer to justice. Within IMPD, pressure mounted, cold case investigators reassigned tasks. One team reviewed old files on the Black Blazer, another delved into Sophia's relationships, especially past suspects like Eric Dawson and Mark Ellison. A third explored the possibility of a stranger exploiting Sophia's lone walk. Connecting the remains' DNA to the Civic's blood opened a direct path, finding a second DNA trace, the killer's. Old swabs, seat fabric, even dirt on Sophia's shoes, were retrieved from storage, sent for modern testing. Each item could now be the golden key to exposing the murderer. Tension gripped the cold case meeting room. A massive timeline board was erected from 11:30 p.m. on September 12, 1998. When Sophia left the diner, to the Civic's discovery, to the 2019 remains found near I-465. Gaps remained, but the picture had a frame. Most crucially, police knew they weren't chasing a ghost anymore. They faced a real murder, with a flesh-and-blood killer who had yet to pay. After Sophia Brown's case was reclassified as a homicide, the cold case unit poured all efforts into reviewing names from the 1998 file. Among scattered suspects, 2 stood out: Eric Dawson, Sophia's volatile ex-boyfriend, and Mark Ellison, the harassing coworker. Both had been questioned, both had shaky alibis, and both had complex ties to the victim. But as old data merged with new clues, one figure grew clearer. Old records showed Dawson owned a black Chevy Blazer in the late 1990s, matching the vehicle the taxi driver mentioned in 1998. When this surfaced, the team fell silent for seconds, as if collectively realizing a missed key. The taxi driver's vague account, once dismissed due to no surveillance, now aligned with reality. Dawson had the exact vehicle described, and at the time, he lived near Washington Street. This was no mere coincidence, yet Mark Ellison couldn't be easily dismissed. His aggressive history, including the 2004 assault arrest, showed a pattern, possibly emerging by the late 1990s. He was among the last to see Sophia at the diner, leaving just 15 minutes before her disappearance. His presence at the scene and troubled character kept him on the short list, but the key difference was the vehicle. Ellison was never linked to a Blazer or any matching car, unlike Dawson, who not only owned one but was seen washing it at midnight days after Sophia vanished. A detail police in 1998 deemed unimportant. Hours-long investigative meetings adjusted the timeline to focus on these 2. Detectives reanalyzed every detail: the Civic's bloodstain, the likelihood Sophia was struck in the car, the Civic's abandonment near the diner. All fit a theory where the killer used a second vehicle to transport Sophia and dispose of her body, then returned the Civic. A Blazer would make moving the body to I-465 far easier than a smaller vehicle. Plus, Dawson's home was less than 30 minutes' drive from the disposal site. To bolster the theory, police tracked old Indiana vehicle registrations. After weeks, they found Dawson sold his Blazer in early 1999, months after Sophia's disappearance. This chilled everyone. A man with a violent history, owning the described vehicle, selling it soon after his ex-girlfriend vanished, pieced together a damning picture. The Brown family was updated on this progress. Linda, now frail, sighed hearing Dawson's name again. She recalled Sophia returning home upset, saying Dawson was quick-tempered. Emily, trembling, whispered, "I heard Mom argue with him. I didn't think she'd see him that night. But maybe he found her." These words spurred police to dig deeper. Mark Ellison remained a shadow. No vehicle, no close relationship to lure Sophia to the lot. No DNA in the Civic. All that lingered was his violent past and proximity to the scene. Dawson, however, had opportunity, means, and motive. Detectives concluded, "We need Dawson's DNA. If it matches the Civic's blood, this case could close after over 20 years." In the official report, the suspect list narrowed to 2 names, with Dawson at the top. Once again, Indianapolis waited anxiously. After years of deadlock, the veil over Sophia Brown's death lifted slightly. The killer might still be free, but this time, he had fewer places to hide. As the suspect pool shrank to 2 names, Eric Dawson stood out sharply due to a critical piece. He owned a black Chevy Blazer, the exact vehicle the taxi driver mentioned in 1998. But despite investigative instincts, police knew a vehicle match wasn't enough. They needed absolute scientific proof, and the only thing that could deliver it was the blood stain in Sophia's silver Civic. The sample was sent to Indiana's Advanced DNA Lab, capable of processing minute biological traces with new technology. After weeks, a full DNA profile was built and entered into the National Genealogical Database. Days later, initial results returned, a match to the Dawson family branch. The report boldly stated, "Partial match, Dawson family branch." And that moment left the team nearly breathless. To confirm, police needed to narrow the branch by collecting DNA from Dawson's relatives. A team was sent to Terre Haute, where Dawson's cousin lived, obtaining a saliva sample with consent. Next, a cousin in Ohio was contacted, then a nephew in Kentucky. Each sample went to the lab, each result confirming they shared the same genetic branch as the Civic's blood. A family tree was drawn on a whiteboard in the cold case room. Forensic experts pointed to circles and lines, narrowing the scope. Finally, all data pointed to one name matching gender, age, location, and time: Eric Dawson. To ensure no errors, the final report stated, "Probability of a match to anyone but Eric Dawson, 1/1,000,000th. The DNA in the Civic can only belong to Eric Dawson." The cold case leader read this aloud in a silent room, and the detectives knew, after 21 years, they'd found the true killer. But a problem arose immediately. Upon reviewing Dawson's records, a shocking detail emerged. He died in 2005. Ohio police files noted that summer, Dawson was involved in a shootout with state police after a drug transport stop. The chase ended in a truck lot outside Columbus, where Dawson fired at officers and was shot dead at 37, carrying the secret of 1998 to his grave. This stunned the cold case team. After 21 years of tracking, finding the killer only to learn he'd never face trial was a bitter blow. In a small meeting room at IMPD headquarters that afternoon, silence prevailed. Linda Brown and Sophia's daughter, Emily, sat together, facing the investigators. On the table, a thick file was neatly placed, clipped with a red cover labeled, "Case Hash 9809-124. Brown, Sophia." The cold case leader took a deep breath and said, "We've identified the killer." Linda gripped Emily's trembling hand, waiting. "The person responsible for Sophia's death is Eric Dawson," he continued. Emily nearly stood, her face a mix of shock and rage. Linda choked, tears welling. But then the investigator added, voice low, "Dawson died in 2005 in a shootout with Ohio police. He'll never face trial." Those words stabbed the family's hearts. After over 2 decades, they had a name, but no trial, no confrontation, only a belated truth. Emily buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Then she looked up, tears streaming. At least, now I know Mom didn't abandon me. For years I thought maybe she wanted to disappear, that she didn't want to be with me anymore. Now I know she was taken, not that she chose to leave." Her words weighed heavy on the room. Linda held her granddaughter, her heart torn between pain and relief. For years she'd been haunted by the question, had Sophia chosen to leave her 6-year-old and aging mother behind? Now she had an answer, bitter, but it ended the shadow haunting the family for 21 years. The investigators explained in detail the blood in the Civic, the SB silver necklace found with the remains, the genealogical DNA pinpointing Dawson. Linda listened, nodding, but her eyes were distant. She knew no technology could bring back her daughter. No report could fill the void Sophia left. Emily, trembling, clutched a photo of her mother in her blue denim jacket from the summer of 1998. At least I can tell myself Mom fought. She didn't abandon me, she was stolen from me. As they left the police station, reporters and cameras surrounded them. Linda said nothing, only gripping Emily's hand. Emily managed a few words. "We know the truth, but justice died with him." Her brief statement hit the front pages of local papers the next day. Bitter closure, Brown family knows killer, but no trial. In the following days, the family held a small ceremony at a local cemetery, where a symbolic headstone for Sophia stood since 1999. Now, they could engrave her confirmed date of death. Emily placed white daisies on the grave, whispering, "Mom, I finally found you." Relatives, neighbors, and old friends attended, some crying, others standing silently. All felt the lingering pain mixed with fragile relief. For Linda, the moment of closure was a double-edged sword. She finally had an answer, but it was one she never wanted. In an interview after the memorial, she said, "People say knowing the truth brings relief, but when the truth is that my daughter was murdered and her killer has long been dead, where's the relief in that?" Emily was different. Despite the pain, the truth lifted a psychological burden. "I used to dream Mom left because she didn't want to be with me. Now I can sleep without that nightmare haunting me." MPD considered this one of their toughest cold cases, yet ultimately resolved. In their final report, they acknowledged the 1998 errors, but emphasized that modern DNA technology was the turning point. In the media, Sophia Brown's case was called Indianapolis's costly lesson. The truth can be found, but justice sometimes never catches up with time. The Brown family now carried a unique closure, not a victory, but a bitter acceptance. They knew the killer's name, what happened, but would never hear his confession or see a sentence pronounced. All they had were memories, a grave and a belated truth reminding them Sophia never chose to vanish. The day after MPD officially announced the investigation's results, the Indianapolis Star ran a bold front-page headline, 1998, Cold Case Solved, Arrest Shocks Community. Below it, a photo of a young Sophia Brown smiling in her faded blue denim jacket stood out against a white background. The article not only detailed the DNA confirming Eric Dawson as the killer, but exposed the string of 1998 investigative errors. The detail that the blood stain in the Honda Civic was deemed too small to analyze sparked public outrage. People felt betrayed, as evidence that could have solved the case early was overlooked. Street conversations, coffee shops, and radio waves buzzed with one question: if the police had done their job right from the start, could Sophia have had justice sooner? Local television seized the sentiment. WTHR hosted a live talk show featuring legal experts, journalists, and former investigators. Callers vented, angry. They had the evidence in their hands. Why say it was too small to analyze? That was a woman's life. Another demanded, we trusted them, and they left the Brown family waiting for 21 years. Who's accountable? Those questions hit MPD like hammer blows. A former investigator from Sophia's case appeared on the show, face tense, defending. In 1998, technology couldn't process such a small DNA sample. We couldn't do more. The host countered, "Sir, other agencies at the time tested new technology and at least preserved samples better." MPD not only overlooked it, but let the case slide into a cold file. Wasn't that a mistake? The ex-investigator faltered, repeating they did their best with what was available. The studio audience booed, some standing to clap in protest. The anger didn't stop at the talk show. Social media analyses spread rapidly. An independent journalist wrote, "Sophia Brown wasn't just a victim of a killer, she was a victim of systemic apathy." Shared thousands of times, the post turned the case into a symbol of 1990s investigative failures. Residents expressed deep sympathy for the Brown family, but demanded a public apology from police and cold case unit reform. In bars and diners, Dawson's story fueled talk. Some recalled him as a troublemaker, getting into fights in parking lots, but none suspected a murderer. That he died in 2005 deepened the community's frustration. We'll never see him in court, never hear why he killed Sophia. A middle-aged man fumed in an interview. All we've got is paperwork and a late explanation. On a morning radio show, a heated discussion unfolded between callers and the host. One listener said, "I have a daughter Sophia's age when she vanished. I remember the fear gripping the city then. Police told us to trust them. Now what? They missed the biggest chance." The host concluded, "This isn't just the Brown story, it's all of ours," about how justice was delayed. MPD faced immense pressure. The agency's spokesperson held a press conference, stating they apologized for past shortcomings and learned from Sophia Brown's case. But the apology didn't quell public anger. Activists demanded an independent investigation into IMPD's handling of 1990s evidence. An Indiana state senator even proposed a bill to enhance cold case unit oversight. The Brown family tried to stay calm amid the media storm. Linda said in a brief interview, "I don't care who apologizes. I just want people to remember Sophia was a real person, a mother, a daughter, a sister. Don't turn her into a symbol for arguments. Remember her as the woman who smiled despite a tough life." Emily spoke more forcefully. "If the police had done better, I could have grown up with my mom. I don't want future generations to repeat this tragedy." Indianapolis was divided between grief and anger. Sophia Brown's case didn't just close with a belated truth. It sparked a broader debate about responsibility, trust, and justice. In that month's nights, on online forums and coffee tables, Sophia's name echoed as a reminder that a small investigative mistake can prolong darkness for decades. Though the community learned Eric Dawson killed Sophia Brown, each revealed detail raised new questions, not all answerable. First, what baffled everyone? How could Sophia's remains lie by I-465 for 21 years undetected? It wasn't a remote forest or mountain, but a tree line by a busy highway. Construction workers, pedestrians, even fishermen passed by, yet the remains surfaced only during the 2019 highway expansion. Did Dawson choose a spot so cunning that Sophia's body sank into earth and leaves? Or did he return to conceal it better as decomposition began? Police had no definitive answer, only admitting time and nature aided the killer. Another chilling question, did Dawson have an accomplice? The investigation showed Sophia was struck in the Civic, then transported for disposal in the black Blazer. Moving an unconscious or dead woman wasn't easy, especially staging the Civic's return near the original scene to mislead. Many veteran detectives believed Dawson had help, but who lingered? Among Dawson's circle, bar buddies, garage co-workers, all denied involvement, and no DNA linked them to the Civic or scene. With Dawson dead since 2005, tracing an accomplice grew ever slimmer. The community raised a grim theory: Sophia might not be Dawson's only victim. Known for volatility, with a domestic violence record, and later drug trafficking ties before his 2005 shootout death, could he have caused other unsolved disappearances in 1990s Indianapolis? Some investigative journalists reviewed missing women cases from that era. At least two, one vanishing after leaving a bar, another while driving to the suburbs, remained unsolved. Though no direct evidence tied Dawson, similarities fueled speculation he was involved. MP didn't dismiss this. In a press conference, a spokesperson said, "We don't rule out Dawson having other victims. Anyone who knew him from 1995, 2005, with relevant information, is urged to contact us." That statement sent chills through the city. If Dawson was a serial killer, his 2005 death closed the door on multiple cases. Small details sparked other questions. Dawson's black Blazer vanished from records. Sold in early 1999, its new owner and whereabouts were unknown. If it still existed, it might hold DNA or evidence. But after 2 decades, finding it was nearly impossible. The Brown family grappled with these questions. Linda sighed. "I don't need to know more. His name is enough for me. But Emily wanted every truth. If he killed my mom, who's to say he didn't do it to others? How many families lived like us, waiting in vain? This tension mirrored the community's a desire to close the case for peace, yet unable to ignore lingering doubts. The media dug into these open questions. An Indianapolis Star investigative feature, Eric Dawson, One Case or More, listed similarities between Sophia's case and other disappearances, questioning MPD's failure to connect them earlier. On TV, crime analysts debated fiercely about Dawson as an unrecognized serial killer. But one question would never be fully answered: Dawson's motive. Why did he kill Sophia? A broken relationship, a burst of rage, or a long simmering violent streak? With his 2005 death, that truth was buried forever. That was the greatest tragedy. The Brown family and Indianapolis could only live with theories, never hearing a confession from the killer's mouth. Though solved, Sophia Brown's case left a gaping void in the city. Unanswered questions loomed like shadows. Why were the remains undetected for 21 years? Did Dawson have an accomplice? And how many other victims went unknown? It was a reminder that sometimes truth is incomplete, and justice, even when it arrives, is never whole. From these unanswered questions and unresolvable pain, the Brown family turned loss into action. Months after the killer's identity was revealed, Emily, Linda, and Sophia's old friends founded the Sophia Brown Foundation. It supported families of missing persons with legal advice, investigator connections, and funding for DNA tests when authorities lacked resources. At the launch, Emily said, "We waited 21 years for the truth. I don't want any other child to grow up not knowing why their mom or dad vanished." Her words brought tears, igniting a movement for cold case justice in Indianapolis. IMPD faced unprecedented reform pressure. After community backlash over the 1998 dismissal of the Civic's bloodstain, the department announced new measures. Evidence storage protocols were upgraded, ensuring even the smallest biological samples were preserved in specialized cold storage. IMPD also signed long-term contracts with private genetic labs, guaranteeing cold cases access to modern technology. A press release stated, "We learned a costly lesson from Sophia Brown's case. From now on, no evidence will be deemed too small to analyze." These weren't just promises. The next year, IMPD reopened 120 other cold cases, using the same genealogical DNA technology that solved Sophia's. Some showed early progress, offering hope to forgotten families. The media dubbed it the Sophia Brown effect, proof that a decades-long case could transform the justice system. For the Browns, their lives remained tied to Sophia's name. Linda, nearing 80, regularly attended foundation events, clutching her daughter's photo, listening to other families' stories of loss. Emily became the public face, appearing on local TV to advocate for better investigations. In one interview, she said, "I lost my mom forever, but if her legacy saves other families from endless waiting, that's the best way to keep her alive." The case was taught in criminal investigation courses at Indiana University. Students learned about the 1998 errors, the importance of thorough witness documentation, and DNA's power. The curriculum called Sophia Brown's case a classic study of delayed but not forgotten justice. On the story's final day, family and friends gathered at the local cemetery to dedicate Sophia's new headstone. No longer symbolic since 1999, her remains now rested with loved ones. The stone bore 3 simple lines: loved, missing, found. As dusk fell over the trees, Emily placed her hand on the cool stone, whispering, "Mom, I finally brought you home." In solemn silence, everyone understood Sophia Brown's case had closed. Not with a trial or sentence, but with a legacy. A foundation aiding grieving families, a reformed investigative system, and a reminder that no evidence, however small, should be overlooked. Sophia Brown, the young woman who vanished in Indianapolis's darkness in 1998, became a symbol of persistent truth-seeking, proof that justice may come late, but it can still pierce the dark. Sophia Brown's case wasn't just a personal tragedy, but reflected enduring issues in American society today. The 1998 bloodstain in the Civic, dismissed as too small to analyze, showed how initial errors can prolong darkness for decades. In a modern context, where DNA and genealogical data prove their power, the lesson is to never underestimate any evidence, however small. Law enforcement and citizens must understand justice comes not from haste, but from patience and rigor in every detail. The Brown family's persistence, from Linda to Emily, reminds us of community and family strength in pushing for justice. Without their annual memorials and relentless pressure on police, Sophia's file might have stayed buried. This is a call to anyone facing systemic apathy. Don't stay silent, as persistent voices can drive change. MPD's overhaul of evidence storage and DNA analysis post-case proves tragedies can spur reform if society doesn't let them fade. In today's America, with thousands of missing persons and cold cases unsolved, Sophia Brown's story teaches trust in evidence value, hold fast to justice, and turn pain into action. Her headstone's loved missing, found, isn't just for her, but for all awaiting discovery, for justice and truth always deserve to be illuminated. Thank you for following Sophia Brown's heartbreaking yet hopeful story of belated justice to the end. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe to the channel to not miss other cold case stories. See you in the next video, where we continue shining light on mysteries thought buried by time.